The emergency beacon screamed through the void of space, its red light pulsing desperately against the darkness. Captain Sarah Chen watched her ship's scanner with growing concern as the signal grew stronger. Whatever was out there had been broadcasting for at least 3 days. "Marcus, what do you make of this?" Sarah called to her engineer, a tall man with grease-stained hands who never seemed to sleep. Marcus looked up from his console, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It's not human tech, Captain. The frequency is all wrong, but whoever they are, they're in serious trouble." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's engines. Sarah's crew of 12 had been hauling medical supplies to the outer colonies when they picked up the distress signal. They were still 2 days from their destination, but something about this call for help felt urgent. "Change course," Sarah decided. "We're going to help." Her pilot, a young woman named Lisa, looked nervous. "Captain, we don't know what's out there. Could be pirates using a fake signal." Sarah understood the concern. Space was dangerous, and pirates often used distress calls to lure unsuspecting ships into traps. But her gut told her this was real. The signal had a raw desperation to it that couldn't be faked. "I know the risks," Sarah said firmly. "But if someone needs help, we help them. That's what humans do." 3 hours later, they found the source of the signal. It wasn't a ship at all, but a small space station spinning slowly in the darkness. The station looked ancient, covered in strange symbols that none of them recognized. Parts of it were clearly damaged, with holes torn in the hull and debris floating around it. "I'm picking up life signs," Marcus reported, his voice tight with worry. "Multiple contacts, but they're weak. Whatever happened here, it happened recently." Sarah stood up from her captain's chair. "Prepare a boarding party. I'm going over there." "Captain, that's not safe," Lisa protested. "We don't know what's inside." "Which is exactly why I need to see for myself," Sarah replied. She was already moving toward the airlock. "Marcus, you're with me. Lisa, keep the ship ready for a quick exit if things go wrong." The docking process took 20 minutes. The station's docking bay was damaged, forcing them to use magnetic clamps to attach their smaller shuttle. When they finally stepped inside, the artificial gravity was working, but barely. They had to be careful not to float away. The corridors were filled with a strange, sweet smell that made their noses burn. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls, and they could hear distant sounds that might have been voices or might have been machinery breaking down. "This way," Marcus whispered, following his scanner toward the strongest life signs. They moved carefully through the twisting passages. The station was clearly designed by aliens. The doorways were the wrong shape, too tall and narrow for humans. The walls were covered in the same strange symbols they had seen on the outside. When they finally reached the source of the life signs, Sarah's heart almost stopped. In a large chamber that looked like some kind of nursery, they found them. Dozens of small, furry creatures huddled together in groups. They looked like a cross between cats and bears, with large eyes and tiny claws. They were clearly young, maybe children. But it was what surrounded them that made Sarah's blood run cold. Adult versions of the same creatures lay scattered around the room. They weren't moving. The children were alone, scared, and slowly starving. One of the small creatures noticed the humans and made a sound that was part whistle, part purr. Soon all of them were looking at Sarah and Marcus with hopeful eyes. "We need to get them out of here," Sarah said immediately. She knelt down near the closest group of youngsters. They backed away at first, but when she held out her hand slowly, one of them approached. It sniffed her fingers and then gently touched her palm with its tiny paw. Marcus was scanning the room with his equipment. "Captain, I'm reading some kind of poison in the air. It's not dangerous to us, but it's deadly to them. Whatever happened here, someone attacked this place." Sarah felt anger burning in her chest. These were children. Someone had deliberately poisoned children. How long do they have? At the current concentration, maybe 2 days, 3 if they're lucky. Sarah looked around the room again. There had to be at least 40 of the young creatures. Her ship could barely hold half that many extra passengers, and they still had medical supplies to deliver to the human colonies. But as she looked into their large, trusting eyes, she knew there was only one choice to make. "We're taking them all," she announced. Marcus stared at her. "Captain, we can't. The ship isn't big enough, and we don't know anything about their biology. We might accidentally hurt them trying to help." "Then we'll figure it out," Sarah said firmly. She stood up and activated her communicator. Lisa, prepare the cargo bay for passengers, lots of them, and see if we have anything that might work as food for alien children. Over the next several hours, Sarah and her crew worked to evacuate the young aliens from their dying station. It wasn't easy. The creatures were scared and didn't understand what was happening. They made sad, mewing sounds as the humans gently carried them to the shuttle. Some of them refused to leave the bodies of what were clearly their parents. Sarah had to force herself not to cry as she carefully separated the children from their dead families. She made them a promise as she did so, speaking in soft tones even though she knew they couldn't understand her words. "I'll take care of you," she whispered to each small face. "I don't know how, but I'll find a way." The last group they evacuated was the hardest. 5 small creatures had barricaded themselves in a corner and wouldn't come out. They hissed and showed their tiny claws when the humans approached. Sarah could see the fear in their eyes, but also something else. Determination. They were trying to protect something. Finally, Marcus managed to move some debris and found what they were guarding. It was a small container filled with what looked like seeds or eggs. The young aliens had been protecting their species' future. "Smart kids," Sarah murmured. She carefully picked up the container and showed it to the 5 guardians. Their eyes widened and they chittered excitedly to each other. Then, to Sarah's surprise, the largest of them walked over and gently placed one of its tiny claws in her hand. It wasn't trying to hurt her. It was giving her something. When she looked closely, she saw that the small creature had deliberately broken off the tip of its claw and placed it in her palm. The others did the same, each one leaving a small, sharp reminder in her hands. Sarah understood. They were trusting her with their most precious possessions. The claws were a symbol, a way of saying that they would remember this moment forever. "I promise," she whispered, closing her fingers carefully around the tiny claws. "I'll return. Somehow, someway I'll bring you home." Back on her ship, the cargo bay had been transformed into a temporary nursery. The young aliens huddled together in groups, still scared but no longer alone. Sarah's crew had managed to find some emergency rations that the creatures seemed to like, and the ship's medical bay was working overtime to analyze their biology. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. 43 alien children were now depending on her. She had promised to take care of them, and she had promised to bring them home. The problem was, she had no idea where their home was or if it even still existed. As her ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying its unusual cargo toward an uncertain future, Sarah looked down at the 5 small claws in her hand. They felt warm against her skin, a reminder of the trust that had been placed in her. She had made a promise to return. Now she had to figure out how to keep it. The stars stretched out ahead of them, and somewhere in that vast darkness was the answer. Sarah just had to find it. The young aliens fell asleep holding each other, their soft purring filling the cargo bay with a sound of hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they were safe. And sometimes that was enough. The Human promised, "I'll return Part 2. Dr. Elena Vasquez had seen many strange things in her 20 years as a xenobiologist, but nothing had prepared her for this. The transport ship had docked at Kepler Station 3 days ago, and the captain had immediately requested her help with a biological emergency. She hadn't expected 43 alien children. "Their metabolism is fascinating," Elena explained to Captain Chen as they watched the young creatures play in the station's modified recreation area. "They're omnivores, but they need a specific mineral that's rare in this part of the galaxy. Without it, they'll start getting sick within a few weeks." Sarah watched one of the smaller aliens trying to climb onto a chair that was far too big for it. 2 of the larger ones immediately came over to help, lifting their friend up with gentle care. Despite everything they had been through, they still looked out for each other. "What about their intelligence?" Sarah asked. "They seem to understand more than they should for children." Elena nodded enthusiastically. "That's what's remarkable. Based on their brain scans, I'd say they're already as smart as human teenagers, maybe smarter. Their species appears to develop cognitive abilities much faster than physical ones. Those little ones you rescued, they might live for hundreds of years." The implications hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. These weren't just scared children she had saved. They were potentially the last members of an incredibly intelligent, long-lived species. The weight of that responsibility felt crushing. "Have you learned anything about their language?" Sarah asked. "Some. They have a complex communication system that combines sounds with body language and even chemical signals. Watch this." Elena approached one of the groups and made a series of clicks and whistles. Several of the young aliens immediately perked up and responded with their own sounds. "What did you say?" "I asked if they were comfortable. They said yes, but they want to know when they're going home." Elena's expression grew serious. "Sarah, they've been asking about their parents. I don't think they fully understand what happened." Sarah felt her heart clench. The aliens had been through so much, and they still had faith that somehow everything would be okay. She looked down at the 5 claws she now wore on a chain around her neck. The creatures who had given them to her were among the most vocal about wanting to go home. "I need to find out where they came from," Sarah said. "There has to be other stations, other colonies. Maybe some of their people survived." Elena hesitated. "Sarah, I've been analyzing the data from their station. Whatever attacked them wasn't random. Someone specifically targeted their life support systems with a poison designed to kill their species. This was genocide." The word hung in the air between them like a curse. Sarah had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made her feel sick. Who would do such a thing to children? "All the more reason to find other survivors," Sarah said firmly. "These kids need to be with their own people." "About that," Elena said carefully, "I've been monitoring their behavior, and I think they've already decided you're their new family. They follow you everywhere, and they get anxious when you're not around. In their culture, I think you might have accidentally adopted them." Sarah blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" Before Elena could answer, one of the larger aliens approached them. It was one of the 5 who had given Sarah their claws, and it carried itself with a confidence that suggested it might be some kind of leader among the group. The creature made a series of complex sounds, gesturing toward Sarah and then toward the other young aliens. Elena listened carefully, occasionally making small noises of acknowledgement. "It says its name is something like Thornpaw in our language," Elena translated, "and it wants to know if you're really going to take them home like you promised." Sarah knelt down so she was at eye level with Thornpaw. The young alien looked back at her with large, golden eyes that seemed far too old for such a small face. "Tell him yes," Sarah said softly. "Tell him I'll find a way." Elena translated, and Thornpaw's response made her gasp in surprise. "It says that if you can't find their original home, then they want to build a new home with you. It says you saved them, so now you're responsible for them forever." Sarah stared at the small alien in amazement. Despite being just a child, Thornpaw spoke with the wisdom of someone much older. The responsibility Elena had mentioned wasn't just Sarah's imagination. It was real, and it was permanent. "There's something else," Elena continued, her voice excited. "I've been studying their genetic material, and I think I know why someone wanted to wipe them out. These creatures have an incredible ability to adapt to new environments. Their DNA is unlike anything I've ever seen. Give them a few generations, and they could probably live anywhere in the galaxy." "That sounds like a good thing," Sarah said, confused. "It is, unless you're someone who wants to control territory. A species this adaptable could spread across the galaxy in a few hundred years. They'd be competition for anyone trying to build an empire." The pieces started falling into place in Sarah's mind. Someone had seen these creatures as a threat and decided to eliminate them before they could spread. But they had underestimated human stubbornness. "Elena, I need you to do something for me," Sarah said, standing up. "I want you to take genetic samples from all of them, store them safely. If something happens to these kids, I want to make sure their species can still survive." "Already done," Elena smiled. "I've been sending encrypted copies to 3 different research facilities. Even if someone tries to finish what they started, these little ones will have a future." Over the next few days, Sarah threw herself into research. She studied star charts, contacted other ship captains, and sent messages to every exploration vessel in known space. Someone somewhere had to have encountered this species before. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A cargo hauler named Captain Rodriguez contacted her with information about a legend he had heard from traders in the Outer Rim. They spoke of a species called the Cathara, master builders who could create colonies on any world. According to the stories, they had vanished mysteriously about 50 years ago. "The thing is," Rodriguez explained over the communication channel, "the traders said the Cathara didn't just disappear. They were hunted. Someone with advanced weapons and ships was systematically destroying their colonies." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Any idea who?" The traders called them the Purifiers. Apparently, they believed only one species should control the galaxy. They've been wiping out anyone they see as competition. After the call ended, Sarah sat in her quarters staring at the star charts. If Rodriguez was right, then the young aliens weren't just refugees from one attack. They might be the last survivors of a 50-year campaign of genocide. But they were also something else. They were proof that the Purifiers could be defeated. After all, they had survived, and now they had humanity on their side. Sarah touched the claws around her neck and made a decision. She wasn't just going to find these children a home. She was going to make sure they had a future. And if the Purifiers wanted to finish what they started, they would have to go through her first. The next morning, she called her crew together. "I know this wasn't what we signed up for," she began. "But those kids need us, and I think we need them too. Humanity has always been about helping others and standing up to bullies. Well, now we have 43 new family members and some Galaxy-class bullies to deal with." Marcus grinned. "So what's the plan, Captain?" Sarah looked out at the stars through the station's viewing port. Somewhere out there was a new home for the young Kithara, and somewhere out there were the monsters who had tried to destroy them. "First, we find them a safe place to grow up," Sarah said. "Then we make sure no one can ever hurt them again." Thornpaw appeared at her side, having learned to move silently through the station. It looked up at her and made a sound that Alina had taught her meant agreement. Sarah smiled down at the young alien. "That's right, little one, we're in this together now." The hunt for a new home was about to begin. The mining colony on Epsilon 7 was supposed to be a temporary stop. Sarah had hoped to find supplies and maybe some information about suitable worlds for the young Kithara. What she found instead changed everything. "Captain, you need to see this," Marcus called urgently from the colony's communication center. His face was pale, and his hands shook slightly as he handed her a data pad. Sarah read the report twice before she could believe it. 3 more colonies had been attacked in the past month. The same pattern every time: life support systems poisoned, all adults dead, children missing. But this time there were survivors who had escaped to tell the story. "The Purifiers," she whispered, "they're still hunting." The mining supervisor, a gruff woman named Kate Murphy, overheard. "You know about those monsters? My cousin's family was on Halo Station when they hit. Killed everyone except the kids. No one knows what happens to the children they take." Sarah felt ice in her veins. The 43 young Kithara on her ship weren't the only survivors. There were others out there, captured and taken to unknown fates. She thought about Thornpaw and the trust in those golden eyes. How many other children were waiting for rescue that might never come? "Kate, I need to ask you something," Sarah said. "If I told you there were alien children who needed protection and that helping them might put your colony in danger, what would you say?" Kate studied Sarah's face for a long moment. "I'd say bring them here. This galaxy's big enough for everyone, and anyone who hurts kids needs to be stopped." That evening, Sarah brought the young Kithara down to the colony. It was the first time they had set foot on a planet since the attack on their station. They stayed close together, their large eyes taking in everything with curiosity and caution. The mining colonists had prepared as best they could. They had set up temporary shelters and gathered food they hoped the aliens could eat. What they hadn't prepared for was how quickly they would fall in love with their visitors. "Look at this one," laughed Tom Richardson, the colony's engineer, as one of the smaller Kithara tried to help him repair a generator. "It's figured out how the power couplings work just by watching me for 10 minutes. The young alien, who had taken the human name, Spark, chittered proudly and showed Tom a more efficient way to route the power cables. Within an hour, the generator was running better than it had in months. But it was Thornpaw who made the biggest impression. The young leader spent time with each colonist, learning their names and somehow communicating despite the language barrier. By the end of the first day, Thornpaw was helping coordinate work schedules and had somehow figured out how to improve the colony's water recycling system. "Captain," Kate said as they watched Thornpaw teaching human children how to weave with local plant fibers. "These aren't just refugees, these are geniuses, every single one of them." Sarah nodded. She had been watching the same thing. The young Kithara weren't just intelligent, they seemed to understand technology and social dynamics in ways that surprised even the adults. They were learning human customs at an incredible rate, but they were also teaching the colonists new ways to think about old problems. That's what makes them dangerous to the purifiers, Sarah realized. A species this gifted could revolutionize galactic civilization. They're not just trying to commit genocide, they're trying to prevent the galaxy from evolving. The attack came 3 days later. Sarah was in the colony's main hall, watching Thornpaw demonstrate a new way to process mineral ore when the alarms started screaming. Kate's voice crackled over the speakers. Unknown ships approaching. They're not responding to hails. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She knew who it was before she even saw them. The ships that emerged from hyperspace were sleek, black, and radiated menace. Purifier vessels, just like in the reports. Everyone to the shelters, Sarah ordered, but Thornpaw grabbed her arm. The young Kithara was looking at the approaching ships with an expression of pure terror, but also determination. Thornpaw made a series of urgent sounds, pointing first at the ships and then at the other young Kithara. Elena, who had come down to the planet to continue her research, quickly translated. It says the purifiers have come for them. It says the colonists will die if they try to protect them, and it won't let that happen. Sarah stared at the young alien in amazement. Even facing the monsters that had destroyed their people, Thornpaw was thinking about protecting others. Tell them we're not abandoning them. We stand together or not at all. Elena translated, and Thornpaw's eyes grew wide with surprise. The young alien looked around at the human colonists who were grabbing weapons and preparing to fight despite being completely outgunned. Something seemed to click in Thornpaw's mind. The young Kithara leader made a decision that would change galactic history. Instead of running or hiding, Thornpaw gathered the other young aliens and led them to the colony's communication center. Working together with a speed that left the humans stunned, they began modifying the equipment. "What are they doing?" Kate demanded. Elena watched in fascination as the young Kithara rewired systems and rerouted power. "I think they're building something, some kind of enhanced communication array." The first purifier ship landed just as the young aliens finished their work. Black-armored soldiers poured out, their weapons designed to kill without destroying valuable technology. They had done this before many times. What they hadn't expected was the message that suddenly broadcast across every communication channel in the sector. It wasn't just audio or video. The young Kithara had somehow created a transmission that included emotional content, memory fragments, and direct neural connections. Every intelligent being within 50 light-years suddenly experienced the attack on the Kithara station from the perspective of the children who had survived it. The galaxy felt the terror of watching parents die. It experienced the loneliness of being hunted across the stars. But most importantly, it shared the hope that had grown when humans chose to help instead of looking the other way. The broadcast lasted only minutes, but its effect was immediate. Across the sector, ships changed course toward Epsilon 7. Some were military vessels responding to a distress call. Others were civilian ships whose crews couldn't ignore what they had experienced. But the most surprising response came from other alien species. Races that had been hiding from the purifiers for decades suddenly found the courage to act. The message had shown them something they had forgotten. They were not alone. The purifier soldiers on Epsilon 7 found themselves facing not just human colonists, but a growing fleet of allied ships arriving to help. More importantly, they faced 43 young Kithara who had just announced to the galaxy that they still existed and that they had friends willing to fight for them. Sarah stood beside Thornpaw as they watched purifier ships retreating in the face of overwhelming opposition. The young alien looked up at her with those wise golden eyes and made a sound that Elena translated as "thank you." "Thank you," Sarah laughed. "You just saved the galaxy from 50 years of oppression and you're thanking me." Thornpaw made another sound, and Elena's translation made Sarah's eyes fill with tears. "It says that humans taught them something their species had forgotten. It says they learned that sometimes the best way to protect yourself is to protect others first." As more ships arrived to offer aid and alliance, Sarah realized that the young Kithara had found their home after all. It wasn't a place. It was an idea. The idea that different species could work together, help each other, and stand against those who would hurt the innocent. The purifiers had tried to eliminate competition for galactic dominance. Instead, they had created the foundation for something new, a true galactic community. And at the center of it, all were 43 young aliens who had chosen to trust a human captain who promised she would bring them home. The promise had been kept, just not in the way anyone expected. 6 months after the Battle of Epsilon 7, as historians were already calling it, Sarah stood on the bridge of the newest addition to the Allied fleet, the KNS Hope. The ship had been built jointly by humans and Cathara, incorporating technologies that neither species could have developed alone. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Andromedan Scouts," reported Lieutenant Hayes, her new communications officer. The crew was now mixed species, with young Cathara serving alongside human officers. Sarah nodded, put it through. The holographic display showed Captain Zethara, one of the reptilian Andromedans who had joined the Alliance after experiencing the Cathara broadcast. His species had been fighting the Purifiers in secret for over a century. "Captain Chen," Zethara's voice carried both excitement and concern. "We've found something. One of our deep scout ships discovered a hidden purifier facility. It appears to be some kind of prison complex." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Prisoners. Thousands of them, multiple species, including many we thought were extinct. And Captain, Zethara paused, "we're detecting Cathara life signs, a lot of them." The bridge fell silent. Thornpaw, who now served as Sarah's cultural advisor and had grown considerably in the past months, made a sound of shock. Elena, who had also joined the crew, quickly translated. "Thornpaw says the elders always told stories about the lost ones. Cathara who were taken during the early purifier raids and never seen again. The children thought they were just legends." "Not legends," Sarah said grimly. "Slaves." The implications were staggering. If the purifiers had been capturing intelligent species for decades instead of simply killing them all, then there might be entire populations of supposedly extinct races still alive. The genocide had been even worse than they had imagined, not just murder, but enslavement. "Zethara, how heavily defended is this facility?" "Very. It's built into an asteroid field surrounded by automated defense platforms. Our scouts counted at least 50 warships on patrol. A direct assault would be suicide." Sarah studied the tactical display that appeared on her screen. The prison complex was massive, built into asteroids connected by enclosed tunnels. It looked like it could hold hundreds of thousands of prisoners. The thought of so many innocent beings trapped there made her feel sick. "There has to be another way," she murmured. Thornpaw approached and made a series of sounds. Elena translated with growing excitement. "Thornpaw says the young Cathara have been thinking about this possibility. They've been working on something they call a resonance cascade. If they can establish a neural link with any Cathara in the prison, they might be able to coordinate a simultaneous uprising across the entire facility." "Is that possible?" Sarah asked. Elena nodded enthusiastically. "The Cathara have limited telepathic abilities within their species. It's how they coordinated so well during the broadcast. If there are adult Cathara in that prison, they might be able to connect with them across space." Sarah looked at Thornpaw, who had grown from a scared child into a brilliant young leader. The idea was dangerous, but it might be their only chance to save the prisoners without massive casualties. "What do you need?" Sarah asked. Over the next 2 weeks, the Allied fleet worked to prepare for the most ambitious rescue mission in galactic history. The plan was complex and relied on precise timing. While a small strike force created a distraction on one side of the facility, Thornpaw and the other young Cathara would attempt to establish contact with the prisoners and coordinate an internal rebellion. The night before the mission, Sarah found Thornpaw alone in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. The young alien had grown tall and strong, but in the starlight, she could still see the scared child she had rescued from a dying station. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" she asked, sitting beside her adoptive child. Thornpaw made a sound that Elena had taught Sarah meant uncertain but determined. Then the young alien pulled something from a pouch, one of the claws that had been given to Sarah all those months ago. Sarah was confused until Thornpaw made a series of gestures. The meaning was clear, the claw was being returned. But why? Through a combination of sounds and gestures, Thornpaw explained. The claws had been a promise, a symbol of trust. Tomorrow, that promise would either be fulfilled or they would all die trying. Either way, the debt would be complete. "No," Sarah said firmly, pushing the claw back toward Thornpaw. "You gave me these as a reminder that some promises are worth keeping forever. Win or lose tomorrow, I'll always be responsible for keeping you safe. All of you." Thornpaw's golden eyes widened with surprise, then filled with something that looked like tears. The young alien made a sound that Sarah had learned was Kithara laughter, but different somehow. Warmer. Elena had told Sarah that the sound meant family joy. The attack began at dawn, ship time. Captain Zethara led a force of Andromedan vessels in a frontal assault on the facility's outer defenses, drawing the Purifier fleet away from the main complex. Meanwhile, Sarah took the Hope and two smaller ships through the asteroid field toward the prison. In the ship's specially modified communication center, Thornpaw and 30 of the other young Kithara linked hands in a circle. They had been practicing this technique for weeks, learning to merge their mental abilities into something stronger than the sum of its parts. Beginning neural scan, Elena reported, looking for Kithara brainwave patterns inside the facility. The minutes stretched like hours. Sarah watched the tactical display, seeing Purifier ships converging on their position. They had maybe 20 minutes before the enemy realized what was really happening. Contact, Elena shouted suddenly. Multiple Kithara mines detected. Thornpaw is establishing a link. On the screen, Sarah could see Thornpaw's face contorted with concentration. The young alien was trembling with effort as it reached across space to touch the minds of its lost people. Connection established, Elena whispered in amazement. Thornpaw is talking to them, the adult Kithara in the prison. They can't believe their children survived. Through the neural link, the adult Kithara prisoners learned what had happened. They discovered that their children had not only survived, but had found allies among the humans. They learned about the alliance that had formed and the hope that had been reborn. Most importantly, they learned that they were not forgotten. The uprising began simultaneously across every section of the prison complex. Kithara, who had been slaves for decades, suddenly fought back with the fury of parents protecting their children. They disabled security systems, opened cell doors, and freed prisoners of other species who had given up hope long ago. The Purifier guards were overwhelmed. They had maintained control through despair and isolation, but now their prisoners were coordinated and furious. Species that had been enemies before their capture worked together, united by their shared suffering and sudden hope. Defensive systems down, reported Marcus from the engineering station. The prisoners have taken control of the main computer. Then let's go get them, Sarah ordered. All ships move in. The rescue itself was chaos, but organized chaos. Ships docked at every available port as thousands of prisoners streamed aboard. The Hope's cargo bays filled with beings Sarah had never seen before, species that had been considered extinct for generations. But the most emotional moment came when Thornpaw finally met the adult Kithara who had survived in the prison. Sarah watched through tears as the young aliens were reunited with elders of their species, many of whom were their own grandparents and great-grandparents. The reunion was brief but profound. The adult Kithara touched their children's faces in wonder, amazed that they had grown so strong and wise. They examined the human ship with curiosity, trying to understand how their species had come to be allied with these strange, generous beings. One of the elders, an ancient Kithara with silver fur and wise eyes, approached Sarah. Through Thornpaw's translation, it spoke words that would be remembered for generations. The children told us of your promise to bring them home. We see now that you have kept that promise in ways we never imagined. You did not just save their bodies. You saved their spirits, their hope, their future. In our culture, this makes you more than an ally. It makes you family. As the Allied fleet jumped to hyperspace with their rescued cargo, Sarah looked around at the mixed crews working together. Humans and Kithara, Andromedans and dozens of other species, all united by the simple idea that everyone deserved freedom and protection. The Purifiers had tried to create a galaxy of slaves serving a single master species. Instead, they had created the foundation for true galactic civilization, one where different species helped each other and stood together against tyranny. And it had all started with 43 scared children and a human captain who refused to look the other way. The promise had been kept. They were all going home. 20 years later, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the Grand Hall of New Kitha, the first joint species city built by the Galactic Alliance. Around her, representatives from over 200 different species conducted business, shared meals, and worked together on projects that would have been impossible for any single race to accomplish alone. The city itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human architectural principles combined with Cathara adaptive technology and Andromedan environmental controls to create something that could house any species comfortably. Gardens from 50 different worlds bloomed side by side, and the air carried the sense of 100 homeworlds. At the center of the hall stood a memorial that brought tears to Sarah's eyes every time she saw it. It was a simple crystal column containing the preserved remains of the space station where she had first found the young Cathara. Surrounding it were holographic images of all the species that had been saved from purifier prison camps over the past 2 decades. The memorial's inscription was written in over 100 languages, but Sarah knew the English version by heart, in memory of those lost to hatred and in honor of those who chose hope. Admiral Chen, a voice behind her spoke with the distinctive harmonic tones of mature Cathara. Sarah turned to see Thornpaw, now fully grown and serving as the elected representative of the Cathara species to the Alliance Council. The scared child she had once rescued had become a brilliant diplomat and one of the most respected leaders in the galaxy. "I'm sorry to interrupt your visit to the memorial," Thornpaw continued in perfect English, "but we have a situation that requires your expertise." Sarah smiled. Even after all these years, Thornpaw still came to her when faced with difficult problems. The bonds formed during those first desperate months had never weakened. If anything, they had grown stronger as the young Cathara had matured. "What's the problem?" Sarah asked as they walked toward the Alliance headquarters. "We've received a distress signal from the Outer Rim. A human exploration vessel has discovered something that shouldn't exist, a purifier fleet that's been hidden for the past 15 years. Sarah's blood ran cold. The purifiers had been defeated at the Battle of Proxima Station 3 years after the prison break, but scattered remnants had continued to cause trouble for another decade. The last confirmed purifier ship had been destroyed 5 years ago. Everyone had assumed the threat was finally over. "How many ships?" Sarah asked. "At least 100, possibly more, but Admiral, that's not the strangest part." Thornpaw paused before continuing. "They're not attacking anyone. According to the exploration vessel, they're building something enormous." In the Alliance headquarters main briefing room, Sarah studied the reconnaissance data with growing concern. The purifier fleet was indeed building something, a massive space station that dwarfed anything the Alliance had ever constructed. Even more disturbing, the station appeared to be some kind of research facility. "What could they be researching that would require a facility this size?" asked General Martinez, the Alliance's chief military strategist. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now the Alliance's chief xenobiologist and still Sarah's closest friend, highlighted a section of the scans. "Look at these energy readings. They're conducting experiments that require enormous amounts of power. The only thing I can think of that would need this much energy would be—" She paused, her face pale. "What?" Sarah demanded. "Genetic engineering, on a massive scale. Admiral, I think they're trying to create a new species." The implications hit everyone in the room at once. The purifiers had always believed that only one species should rule the galaxy. If they couldn't eliminate all competition, they might be trying to create the ultimate competitor, a species designed to be superior to all others. "We have to stop them," Sarah said immediately, "if they succeed." "Admiral," interrupted Captain Rodriguez, who now commanded one of the Alliance's exploration fleets. "There's something else. The human ship that discovered them reported seeing other vessels in the area, ships from species we've never encountered before. The purifiers might not be the only ones interested in this research." Sarah studied the data again, her mind racing through possibilities. After 2 decades of building alliances and fighting for peace, she had thought the galaxy was finally stable. Now it appeared that new threats were emerging from the unknown regions beyond their borders. "Thornpaw, what's the Council's position?" she asked. "Divided," Thornpaw admitted. "Some members want to send a massive fleet to destroy the facility immediately. Others argue that we should try diplomacy first. The newer Alliance members remember what it was like to be hunted by the purifiers, but some of the longer-established species worry that aggressive action might provoke war with whoever these unknown aliens are." Sarah looked around the room at the faces of her colleagues. Many of them had been fighting the purifiers for decades. They deserved peace, but the galaxy seemed determined not to give it to them. "There's a third option," she said slowly. A reconnaissance mission. Small, fast ships that can get close enough to gather real intelligence without starting a war. We need to know what they're building and who they're working with before we decide how to respond. General Martinez nodded. I can have a stealth squadron ready in 48 hours. No, Sarah said firmly. This is too important for a standard military operation. We need people who understand what we're looking for, people who have experience with purifier technology and tactics. I'll lead the mission myself. Alina looked alarmed. Sarah, you're an admiral now, not a ship captain. You can't just... Actually, I can. Sarah stood up, her decision made. As the senior military officer in charge of purifier affairs, I have the authority to conduct special operations when the Alliance's security is at stake. And right now, our security definitely is at stake. Thornpaw made a sound that Sarah recognized as thoughtful consideration. Admiral, if you're planning what I think you're planning, you'll need someone who understands purifier psychology and technology. I volunteer to accompany you. Absolutely not, Sarah said immediately. You're too valuable to the Alliance if something happens to you. If something happens to any of us, the knowledge dies with us, Thornpaw interrupted gently. Admiral, you taught me many years ago that some promises are worth any risk to keep. We promise to protect this galaxy from those who would harm the innocent. This is how we keep that promise. Looking at Thornpaw, Sarah was struck by how much the young alien had grown. The scared child she had rescued had become someone who understood duty and sacrifice as well as any human. The student had become the teacher. All right, Sarah conceded, but we do this my way and we take every precaution possible. 3 days later, the stealth ship Whispering Wind approached the edge of the unknown star system. Sarah's hand-picked team included Thornpaw, Alina, Marcus, who had refused to let Sarah go on another dangerous mission without him, and a young Andromedan intelligence officer named Skelter. What they found when they reached the systems, outer planets exceeded their worst fears. The Purifier Research Station was enormous, easily capable of housing 1 million beings, but it wasn't alone. Surrounding it were ships from at least 6 different species, including some that Sarah had never seen before. The unknown aliens weren't just observers, they were active participants in whatever the purifiers were doing. My God, Alina whispered as she studied the sensor readings. The genetic engineering facility is operational. They're not just experimenting, they're mass-producing something. Can you tell what? Sarah asked. Alina worked frantically at her console, trying to interpret the biological data. It's not a new species. They're modifying existing ones, taking traits from different races and combining them. Enhanced intelligence from the Cathara, physical strength from other species, rapid reproduction rates. They're building an army, Skelter concluded grimly. A perfect army designed to conquer the galaxy. As if to confirm their fears, the sensors detected something that made Sarah's heart skip a beat. Hundreds of ships were beginning to launch from the station, each one carrying thousands of these genetically modified soldiers. Admiral, Marcus called urgently from his station. Those ships are setting course for Alliance space. They'll reach our outer colonies in less than a week. Sarah stared at the tactical display, watching humanity's greatest nightmare come to life. The purifiers had learned from their defeats. Instead of trying to destroy every other species, they had decided to replace them with something of their own creation. But as she looked around at her diverse crew, human, Cathara, and Andromedan working together with perfect coordination, Sarah realized something the purifiers had never understood. The greatest strength of the Alliance wasn't their weapons or their numbers. It was their ability to combine different talents and perspectives to solve impossible problems. Thornpaw, she said quietly, can you establish contact with any Cathara genetic material in those modified soldiers? Thornpaw's eyes widened as he understood what she was suggesting. It's possible. If they used actual Cathara DNA rather than just copying traits, there might be a connection. But Admiral, attempting to influence that many minds at once. Could kill you, Sarah finished. I know, but it might also turn the Purifier's own army against them. The question is, are you willing to risk it? Thornpaw looked at the display showing thousands of ships heading toward innocent colonies. Then he looked at Sarah, the human who had taught him that protecting others was worth any sacrifice. I made a promise too, Thornpaw said softly. I promised to protect the galaxy that protected me. Let's keep our promises together. As the Whispering Wind prepared for the most dangerous mission of Sarah's career, she touched the chain around her neck. The 5 claws were still there, worn smooth by 2 decades of carrying them. They had started as symbols of trust between species. Now they would become symbols of sacrifice for the greater good. The final battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin.